I just want to say what a joy it is to be asked by Father Michael to give some reflections on the history of our beautiful parish, St. Michael's. And that's a joy because, well, you know, I'm sort of like the grandfather of the parish. We have all the wonderful young priests, and they're the fathers around now. And I'm a grandfather-like of this beautiful St. Michael's family. And I just, you know, like grandfathers, they know what happened a long time ago. They know what's going on right now, and they have great and wonderful hopes and dreams for the future. And I feel that's the same thing that I'm in, the position that I'm in right now, in my age and with my understanding of just where we've come from to have this beautiful parish here in Cary at the present time. And that just gives me a great joy to be with you folks and share some of these insights and understandings and make you as proud as I am of this beautiful St. Michael's family. What a gift we have in each other. And it's just a beautiful journey that we've made. And so let's just begin our journey now. This is interesting. Here we are in downtown Cary. The Cary Town Center is right adjoining us, and we are on a piece of property, the corner of Walnut and Maynard. And many of you are very familiar with this. There's Barnes & Noble right back there, and right up front is On the Border. And this used to be Catholic property. It was where the very first church was located of St. Michael's here in Cary. And you see, it all started out when Our Lady of Lourdes Parish decided to have a mission out here in Cary. And the mission was titled St. Michael's. Now, how did it get that name? Bishop Waters wanted the archangels to surround Raleigh. And so he had St. Raphael's in mind, and he had St. Michael's in mind, and St. Michael's was established right here at the corner of Maynard and Walnut. And one of the first priests assigned here, now this is very interesting, one of the first priests assigned out here was Father Michael Carey. Can you get that? Michael, St. Michael's, Cary, North Carolina. Interesting. The very first priest that came out and offered Mass and established the Catholic presence here in Cary was Father Michael Carey. It's a beautiful piece of property right here in downtown Cary. And but it was, the site, the buildings and so forth were not of a sense to handle all the expansion that was going on here in Cary. You see, we were beginning to really grow back in the 60s, and this church was built in 1963, and it was sort of an educational building or a multi-purpose building to begin with, and not a real church. And so the people that were here, and the pastor at that time, Father Kevin Fahey, back in the 90s, he decided to expand and build another church on a different piece of property. He saw that Cary was expanding to the west, and he purchased property out on High House Road for this particular expansion. And did we ever expand from a parish of around 1,400 families to in the thousands of families. So how does one go from building taking a church that you actually have, the one here on this property, and beginning a whole new church some distance away, about 4 miles away, out on High House Road? Well, that's interesting. We decided to sell this property in order to begin the fundraising for the new structure. And in light of that, we had to go somewhere. We had to move on for 1 year or more while our church was being built. Well, the genius of it all was the lay people and people got together and looked for property wherever we could go, and they found a beautiful site on Chatham Street. Well, it's not that beautiful. It's sort of ugly, really. It was a warehouse, but of all things, it was a beer warehouse. A beer warehouse. It was the Budweiser facility here in Cary, North Carolina, run by the Harris Company, the Harris Distributing Company. So everybody in Cary did not like to know that they had a beer warehouse right in the center of the place. So it was always referred to as the Harris Building. And so our folks got together. Steve Edwards was really involved in this. Steve Edwards got a bunch of guys and their lovely wives and children and all out there. And I remember just the sight of them laying the floor in that particular building. Clancy and Thays came in and did some construction and put huge doors in for fire exits. And here we were, in a place with no heat, but we had plenty of air conditioning because up above you had all these coolers that were sending cold air down to keep the beer cool. Well, we could use those during the summer to keep ourselves cool. But the main problem was the noise that the beer coolers made. You couldn't even preach above all of that. So we would turn the coolers off during the summer so people could hear us. Did many people show up? Oh yeah, lots of folks showed up. Why did they show up in such numbers? Well, they were dedicated Catholics, number one, but also we had a little gimmick. We gave a six-pack to every sixth person that walked in. The situation there at the beer warehouse was very unique, very unique. Yeah, very difficult parking. You had a hill to climb if you're walking up from a distance. You, as I mentioned, you would be cold in the winter and maybe a little warm in the summer. The setting was just a warehouse with these huge coolers above you, the noise. You had an altar there. You had the pews from the old church. We did put those in there. We also had a preschool running over to in part of that warehouse. Then the other thing about the place was that it was, well, let's put it this way. It made real dedicated people out of the folks that came there. They were dedicated. They loved the church. They loved the goals that were announced of building a new church. And they bonded together with a sense of enthusiasm and with a sense of, we're going to accomplish something. We're going to make something really happen in Cary. We're going to build a magnificent new Catholic church out on Hiles Road. And here they bonded together in these difficulties and this struggle and this wonderment of what's going to happen. So they were a very dedicated group. They came from many parts of the country. The place was beginning to be exploding with folks coming in to Research Triangle Park. It was, well, these kind of folks were, for the most part, Yankees. Actually, that's why Cary is called Cary, C-A-R-Y, Contentment Area for Relocated Yankees. And the other point is that so many of those Yankees were Catholic. So our parish was growing in the midst of being in a very difficult situation of space, of no parking, no all the amenities that usually go with a church. And yet they came in droves. They especially came for the wonderful fish fries we had on Friday night during Lent. The groundwork was being laid at the beer warehouse for the identity of the parish. That's so fascinating. You know, we had people coming from the north, coming from the far west, We had a wonderful priest that was the former pastor of St. Michael's, Father Charlie Mulholland, and he had a special outreach to our Spanish-speaking folks. So we were engaged in offering the Mass in Spanish. We had African-American folks that were coming to St. Michael's. Also at that particular time, there was a need for a Korean community to have worship here in this part of Raleigh area. And St. Michael's offered to the Korean community a place to worship. And so now you're beginning to see, my goodness, the Spanish, the African Americans, the Koreans, and you had folks coming down. You had another group of people called Jerseyites coming from New Jersey. And they came down on 95. We were thinking of even putting a blockade on Highway 95 to stop all these folks from coming, because we were getting too crowded. Well, no, we didn't do that. But anyway, so the next thing is you had all these folks coming from everywhere. It was truly Catholic. You know what Catholic is? Here comes everybody. So we became this international parish. And we've thrived on that recognition ever since. The blending of all these cultures and backgrounds and different approaches towards worship. It's been so beautiful and so wonderful, and St. Michael's has been known for that. In fact, we had a festival called the International Festival, celebrated each year, where the people would dress up in their different gowns and their different backgrounds and cultures. And we had the food service of all those different flavors and backgrounds and different type of cuisine. It was an exciting time for our parish. And it made a mark on us that's lasted to this day. As time went on, Father Fahey laid the groundwork for this tremendous expansion that was going to occur. And actually, that's when I came on the scene. It was right after Easter in 1995. And I came on the scene, and one particular Sunday, they finished Mass, and then all of a sudden, all the pews were taken out of the church that afternoon, Sunday afternoon. And they were moved over to the new location, the Harris Building, known in Cary by that title, but we knew it as the Beer Warehouse, which it actually was. And the pews were placed in there, and for next Sunday's worship, it would be at the Beer Warehouse for a period of time while the new church was being constructed. The very interesting thing about all that is that during the first week, we had no place for daily Mass. So we went to the local funeral home located downtown here on Cary, and attended Mass at that particular funeral home for the period of the first week of our existence out this way. I don't know the exact reason why this location was picked. I would assume that maybe it was a plot of land that was available, and the developers of Preston Country Club had title to this land. And they decided to divvy it up and to give it, or not to give it, allow it to be purchased by churches. And so the Methodist Church down the way purchased part of the land. The Baptist Church that was located next door, that we eventually bought, was located on this plot of land, and ourselves. And so maybe it was considered a need for the community to have worship in this area, and they made this available to churches and offered it probably to the Catholic people. That could be the reason. I met with a realtor in town about something else. We were trying to purchase a place for our Child Development Center. and there was a location here, and the realtor owned it. So I go in to see him, and I sit down, and he's leaning back in his chair, and he tells me, he says, well, you know, I knew you were a former bishop, Bishop Waters. You know, you guys couldn't buy no property out here. Did you know that? I said, no, I didn't know that. He said, no one would sell any property to the Catholic people. I don't, that's just, and he said, what I did, I knew the boy that owned all that property there where Barnes & Nobles is now. I knew him real good. And I bought it in my name from him, and I sold it to Bishop Waters. You didn't know that, did you? So now how does one go about building a new church or expanding? Well, there are many ways of going about it. You can expand your church by building a multi-use facility. Like you could have Mass in it, and you could also move the chairs around and so forth, and have a dining facility, and you could also, if you build a gym first, you could have a gymnasium and have that as a church. Well, those were the things that people were pondering as they decided to build the new St. Michael's. And they had a lovely, dear, wonderful woman by the name of Ada Della Posa that was our building chair. She was an incredible person. She lived in Cary. She was a convert to Catholicism, but she also was very much involved in North Carolina State University, and she worked in the extension program, which was an outreach of the university towards the whole state of North Carolina. And there are extension agents in every county. And so she coordinated these extension agencies from all over North Carolina. She had a wonderful ability to work with people, to coordinate others, and she'd done that. In fact, the McKimmon Center over at North Carolina State is named, she's very responsible for the construction of that, and for that whole idea of a continuing education center for North Carolina State University. And she assumed the responsibility of chair for the building committee. She was very collegial. She established groups and so forth like that. And they discussed and what they would like to see in the new facility that was being built out here on High House Road. And this collegiality, this input from below, these people coming together, they decided they wanted a church, not a particular building that could be like a church, but a real church. And they would, even to the details of, they would want a room where the bride could dress. They would want a room, a large sacristy for the priest to have, a chapel for daily mass. All of these different things were combined with her collegial approach towards working with people and to give the ideas of building the new St. Michael's. So they built the church first. That was a big, in all of these discussions, you know, some folks thought they might like to have an education building as the first building built. Others thought they'd want a gym, or where people could use that, and maybe make that the church at times. So this was all discussed by the parish council. And one particular night, a dear woman stood up and she said, you know, I lived in a certain town in North Carolina, and I was married in a gym. My daughter was baptized in a gym. She was married in a gymnasium, and I just don't want to see that happen here. I want a real church built out on High House Road. And that was discussed at that particular parish council meeting, and the decision was reached at that time to have a complete and total structure of a very beautiful church that many people would be proud not only to worship in, but would be an attractive and beautiful architectural site for the community. And so it was interesting how the committee then decided to get architects for the church, and the word church kept coming up. And one of the finest church architects in the state are located in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's the WKWW firm. And that's their sole responsibility, and their expertise was in church building. And so they were hired. And they came here and met time and time again with the parishioners and discussed various ideas, the shape of the church, the size of the church, the center focused towards the altar. We had an interesting situation in North Carolina, and the diocese at that time preferred that people sit close to the altar. And so that was a parameter that was being discussed at the time. And so all of this was very beautifully handled by WKWW, the architectural firm, and then with the wonderful work of Clancy and Thays, the construction firm, which had already built a number of Catholic churches in the area, St. Raphael's Catholic Church, St. Francis, and they had their expertise and their background in knowing just what to do and how to work with parish councils and how to work with priests and the Diocese of Raleigh. And so it was a beautiful combination of the Catholic people here at the parish, the building committee of the church, and these two mammoth and wonderful firms that are so adept at building here in North Carolina. Clancy and Thays in construction, and WKWW in architectural designs. It's an interesting thing in building a church. You have your architectural plan, and you have your builder, and you have your bids, and you have your the amount of money that you need to construct what you're doing. And all those come and work together and so forth like that, and slowly but surely the building takes its form. And you meet weekly with the architects and the builders, and to see that all is on target for the construction that you hope to have completed by a certain date. As you go along, you see things that maybe need to be changed, and the change orders. And when we built St. Michael's, we noticed a few things. First of all, we decided to expand the choir area here at St. Michael's because of we having a wonderful experience with our musicians and with our choir and so forth, and we knew that we needed greater space for that. And so that was enlarged. We also noticed that there are other things. For instance, the daily chapel that was for use for weekday mass was another feature that we enhanced, and how do we isolate that from the main church with glass doors and so forth like that. There was all of these different things that had to be done. And then you get into the interior design, and you have the different liturgical things that are needed for the worship in our church. We wanted an altar that would have space not only at the altar but surrounding it, the whole area there for concelebrated masses, namely a number of priests to be in the sanctuary. Question would come up, are we going to have glass windows or stained glass windows? We decided to have regular glass for the first year or two, and then raise the money for the stained glass windows. All of these things came into focus. The design of the church, as I mentioned, it was completed and dedicated. We did not have stained glass windows in the church at that particular time. It was just the plain glass, because people had not donated the money necessary for the stained glass windows. And so we had a campaign to obtain the stained glass windows. We hired a wonderful designer who studied in Europe from Tennessee, and he would come to Cary on occasion. He would fly his own plane in, come with all of his particular drawings. It's very interesting with drawings for stained glass windows. They are called, they have an interesting name, they're called cartoons. And these cartoons were figures of saints, figures of people in biblical history, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they were incorporated in the designs that we have in the church. The wonderful arrangement of these was given in advice by liturgical folks from around the country, and especially here in this area. And the placement of the people, of the saints, was interesting. Closest to the altar, you have the Blessed Mother and John the Baptist. Jesus referred to John the Baptist as the greatest man who ever lived, and his dear mother, we know, his special love of her. So they were focused on the sanctuary. And above, we have the 12 apostles. And that's interesting, too, because when I came into the church one day, I was looking up, and they were fixing the symbols for the 12 apostles. And I don't know whether I was in a fog or what, and I hollered up to the designer and the installer, and I said, "That cross is upside down." And he's looking at me, and he's saying, "Yeah, it is." And I said, "It's upside down, get it around." And he said, "Wait a minute, this is supposed to be this way. It's St. Peter's cross." "Oh, right. He was crucified upside down in St. Peter's Square." "Well, that's it, yeah. It's right, thank you, thank you." But many times people come into the church and they always pull me aside and they say, "Father, that cross up yonder, it's upside down." And I will say, "Shh, don't talk about that. That's under litigation right now. Lawyers are working on all that. Don't talk about it, don't talk about it." And the wife will say, "See, I told you it's wrong." And so the next thing is I say, "No, that's Peter's cross. You know, he was crucified in front of St. Peter's Church in Rome, in that square, upside down." And so the stained glass windows were installed. And in this particular chapel in which I'm sitting now, you have the Rosary windows. We have behind me the various mysteries of the Rosary, and you have those portrayed in these particular windows of the particular mysteries. Actually, when this was built, we did not have the mysteries that John Paul II asked for the church to have, the luminous mysteries. And they are not here. You have the glorious and the sorrowful mysteries and the other mysteries of the Rosary, but not the luminous mysteries. Over the window, over in the altar here in the side chapel, you have the beautiful pelican. It's a symbol of the Eucharist, because the pelican feeds its young by actually from its own body. And so that's the symbol there with the pelican and the Eucharistic symbols to the left and right of that. There was tremendous growth out this way in western Wake County. And a number of the dear Catholic people, they wish to have a Catholic school located in this particular area. At the same time, one of our priests was on sabbatical, Father Donald Stibe, and now Monsignor Stibe, and he was going to return to North Carolina, and he was going to build a church out in this area as well. And the idea surfaced that perhaps, since there were so many folks that wanted a Catholic school, that to build just one Catholic school would be not sufficient for the demand. So the thought surfaced, well, maybe we could build 2 Catholic schools at one time and open them at the same time and have accommodation for all of the dear folks of the area who wish to send their children to Catholic education and have a Catholic school connected with the parish. In the area then, you had St. Michael's and you had St. Andrew's. St. Andrew's Parish felt that with their particular landscape and their particular property and so forth like that, they did not have room for a school. And so, but with the new situation of Father Stibe building a parish, you could incorporate a school in the design and in the area in which the parish is located. And so Father Stibe and I worked jointly with the pastor at St. Andrew's to have a combined campaign from the 3 parishes to build 2 Catholic schools. And both St. Michael's and St. Mary Magdalene School opened on the same day in the year 2000. The question is, well, where did the priest live? Well, the priests at that particular time, the tradition up north was to have the priest live actually on the property of the church. That was always sort of the thing that was happening at that time. The trend was during that particular period that this church was built, to have the priest adjacent to or nearby the church property, to sort of give him some space when he leaves the church to go to his home. And they thought that would be better than having it actually right on the property where he's there for every Boy Scout that wants the key to the Boy Scout room. And so this particular situation was that we purchased a building in the Weatherstone development right adjoining the church property. And at the time we purchased that, we arranged with the realty firm that was handling that particular development that we would have access from the rectory through the little wood path up to the church. And that was the beginnings of where the priests resided, right in the Weatherstone area next to the St. Michael's Church. So as we look at St. Michael's, it is truly a unique parish. Unique in its not only in its structure and its location, as every parish is, but in the sense of its sort of its identity. And as I often think, what a gift we have in all of the people that have come into the area that form the parish at this particular time. Namely, we have the main body of the church are people from all over the United States, but we also have the beautiful and wonderful congregation of our Spanish people. And that began with Father Mulholland offering Mass here in Spanish. As I mentioned, we did often have a congregation of Korean folks, but now they have built their own parish here in the area. We have African Americans that gather here in great numbers. We have the wonderful new arrival of so many people that are coming from India and from Mumbai and from Goa area. Beautiful folks that have deep devotion to the church. And we're so proud of that particular aspect of our Catholicity. The church is ever expanding in this international flavor. And it's so beautiful and so wonderful to see all the folks working together and the many ministries and the many outreaches that we have. For instance, the outreach now, we're hiring a full-time person to be on staff with Catholic Charities for counseling. That's an interesting and wonderful development. And Father Michael has very much encouraged that since his arrival. We also have our Honduras program that reaches out to our sister parish in Honduras, and we have over so many people involved in education and our various ministries. It's just unbelievable to see the volunteerism that's so present here at St. Michael's. It's a response to, as it's always been, from moving from that one site to another, from the difficulties and struggles of the beer warehouse to the beautiful ambiance that we have now of this marvelous campus located here in western Wake County. Let us just think of the words of the beautiful prayer that we have to St. Michael the Archangel. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Another thing that I'm very excited about is, when you're a grandfather, you get gray hair and you're always looking at the folks that are coming along. And I'm just so happy and proud with so many of our congregation that are young families with their beautiful children. And I look about and I see also young priests, our Father Michael, our pastor, and Father Noe, our wonderful priest of our parish. Reminds me so much of the young priests when I was back in high school. Yeah, and Father Oji, the dimension that he brings to this parish. Yeah, it's just great and wonderful to see that enthusiasm and that youth as depicted in our leadership here at the present time. My father said, John, there's two things I want you to remember. He said that the shortest pencil is better than the longest memory. And he also taught me that the secret of administration is delegation. Well, this was a joy coming to St. Michael's because you had people here that really wanted to get involved in building a new parish. And just to see that enthusiasm on the part of so many of these wonderful people that had come into the area, had been here, others that had been here through their whole lifetime and be Catholics of this particular area, but those coming in from every place, working in Research Triangle Park. The church really began here in Raleigh with the arrival of IBM. IBM, I've been moved, IBM. And the folks came down from the north and began to come into this area in numbers in the Catholicism. They wanted their schools, they wanted larger churches, and all this began to grow. And then with Research Triangle Park just up the way here, this huge, it's the oldest research park in the country, and it's the largest and it's the most prestigious. And so just to see all this happen around us was just a true gift, to see this particular swell of folks that not only wanted to come to church, they wanted to be part of church, involved, make it happen. And that's the joy of being pastor here. It was like an orchestra leader. You had all the people that knew how to play the instruments quite well, and they all worked together and blended to perform beautiful music for the praise of God and for the to make church happen here in western Wake County. Fondest memory is that raising of the cross, standing out there in the cold. I had a cold. I wasn't feeling well, and it's standing out there, and then with all these 50 or 60 people that came in the midst of this, and then going ahead in that with the snow and sleet and the crane moving that cross up and putting it on top, and the workmen out there working in the snow, putting all that up there, and then me going back to my house. In my bedroom, I could glance over from where I went back to bed with my cold and looking at the church and watching him during the afternoon, still working up there, putting the bolts and finishing up the particular area around the cross that needed to be affixed to the top of our building. That was a great memory. In the beginning, I mentioned that I'm looking at all this like the grandfather in my age and looking back, and you're just so proud of your children. And that's the way I'm proud of our people of St. Michael's. Beautiful folks that come here to worship, that come here to have made this church what it is, that have been so involved and so enthusiastic. And as a grandfather, you look to the future and you think of, wow, what's going to happen? And I'm so excited as I look around now and see the folks that are here. You know, we've been through a whole lot recently in this pandemic. We've sort of like our folks back then. We've been held back. We were in a beer warehouse. We were held back from seeing the reality of this beautiful church that we built. And as we come out of all of this, I'm very enthusiastic that the people will come forward with the younger folks, the people that have just moved here, people that have just joined St. Michael's, along with all those that have been through the heat of the day. And they will just rejoice in having new ideas for different ministries, like the ministry of the outreach towards Catholic charities in our area. This enthusiasm, this drive that the young people will pick up on a deeper love of Christ Jesus and want to grow closer to Him in service of others. That's the beautiful thing. I see lay involvement is ever increasing in the sense of this particular parish and beyond. Have a dream for the future that we will continue to grow, not only in numbers, but in depth of spirituality, where we look beyond, where we just think not only of things that can happen in this lifetime, but the eternity that awaits us in heaven. It's interesting, through the years, St. Michael's has played a very significant role in Cary. I was once speaking to the mayor of Cary, Coca Booth, and he was from the Midwest, and he was very used to Catholicism. And he said, you know, when I go out to the airport to greet people, executives that are flying in here and are wondering whether to settle in the Cary area, Raleigh area, right in this area, he said, I pick them up at the airport, and one of the first things I do is drive by St. Michael's property and drive around it and let them see the beautiful campus and the school, letting them know that Catholicism and that particular church is a place where they can worship, where they can send their children to school, and where they can find a place that's familiar to them in Cary as they begin their existence here. And I'm so proud of everything that's going on at St. Michael's. And he was a great supporter of the expansion that was occurring here over the years. And think of him as well. Coca Booth, mayor of Cary, as one of our biggest proponents. The excitement that I'm having about the 25th is just standing around looking at my children, my grandchildren, and seeing all that's happening here, and how it's going to be even more exciting as the virus recedes, as the vaccinations increase, and as we just come back to the church where we want to be and we long to be, and we're so excited to engage in worship again, not at a distance, but in person. And that's exciting for me. It's exciting also to learn that Father Michael has some real plans for some improvements here at the parish, and a sense of the buildings, and also a sense of outreach programs that are coming on board. And that makes me excited too. It's just not, it's not a place that's just standing still. It's moving, it's alive, it's changing, it's growing, it's developing. And it's great enthusiasm for me just watching all that as Grandpa looking around. You know, there's a lot of difference between watching a game on television and being present to the game. You can pick up what's happening from the screen and see the plays and enjoy the thunderous response of the crowd. But when you get into the action of a gymnasium or a performance on stage or whatever that's like, when you're part and parcel of it, as you applaud, as you think, as you're right there seeing it, and as you hear people around you, you know, that's very true with church as well. Just to watch it on a video screen at a distance is, it's just not fulfilling. It's nice, it's good, it's grand, but it's not like being at a tournament play or being at a golf match or being involved in seeing and witnessing and watching and people around you. Seeing beautiful faces that you've known for so long, seeing people come up to the Eucharist, making their bows, receiving the body and blood of the Lord right before you, hearing the songs right immediately as they're proclaimed, and looking over at the choir as they sing, seeing the priest up at the altar and his smiles and his warmth and his graciousness, and seeing his devotion to the Christ up close, really involved. There's a lot of difference between watching and being present. You know, I've mentioned a lot about how people's involvement and the response to people's needs and people's wishes have made St. Michael's the church that it is today. And for instance, people that went from the shopping center location downtown out here. Well, there was also always that interest of people to expand, to do more, to enhance what we were about. And one of them was Mark Barrick, and he asked me once, he said, "Father, you really ought to purchase the property next door." And I would say, yes, that's a great idea. Maybe we will do that. Yeah, I'm fine with that, but well, let's think about it. And so he said, no, and I finally said, another time, he said, "Father, we should really buy that property next door." And I said, "Mark, I'll go over there tomorrow morning and buy the property next door." You see, the minister next door, we were great friends. We'd known each other. His daughter was married in that particular setting, and she came over here and had a reception here at St. Michael's. We had a ice maker that we didn't need, and we got a larger one, and I gave that smaller one to the beautiful Baptist community next door. And so we would have lunch every now and then. So the next morning, I was walking over to that church. And as I was walking, Mark Barrick drove by with his wife. He was on the airport, and we stopped in the parking lot over there, and he said, "What are you doing? You going after property?" And I said, "Yes, I am." We laughed, and we said the Memorare at that time. I walked into the church and told the pastor. He said, "Hi, how are you doing? Sit down." We talked. And I said, "You know, my people want to buy your church." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well," he said, "we're not selling it." And I said, "No." He said, "No, because we have a new church planned for here. See the design?" I looked, beautiful church. He said, "We were getting in the fundraisers, and that's all happening. We're not planning to sell the church." And I said, "Oh my," I was sort of crushed in a way, thinking we needed this for our school, have athletic fields and so forth. We needed additional space for meetings and all of that. What were we going to do? And he said, "No, but I'll mention it to the board tonight." So that night, he mentioned it to the board. He called me at 9:30. They said, "We want to talk to you. We would really not wish to build another big church alongside this church for the traffic and everything else like that. But we need to talk about this. So we started talking and praying about it for a period of maybe 3 or 4 months. And in the meantime, they were not able to locate any property that fit their needs. My dear friend Tom Petoskey and I he's a business manager here, we were down at the local restaurant at the foot of the hill, and at that time, and we were sitting at the bar actually, and we said that we got to do something. They're not going to sell because they can't move. They can't find property that's convenient for them or is large enough. And we were talking about that, and I said, well, why don't we say the Memorare? We reached out. I put my little scotch aside, and we said the Memorare together. We walked out of that restaurant. We walked out, and all of a sudden in the distance was a gentleman hollering, "Father Wall! Father Wall!" And it was a wonderful man from originally from Newton Grove area, and I'd known him down in that way and his family. And he's hollering to me and he's saying, "Hi, how are you?" He was a realtor that had put together all of Preston and all of this area out here. He knew when years before, he knew the farms and all of that. And I walked over to him and I said, "We need your help." And he said, what can I do for you? And I said, well, our dear friends, the Baptists next door. He said, "I'm Baptist." And I said, "Whoa." He said, "I know all them folks." And I said, "Well, come on up tomorrow and see them and help them locate some property." And he did, and he gave them the enthusiasm that they could find additional property. And so that we were able to purchase the property next door, and we were able to expand our whole facilities here in the sense of especially our athletic fields for our beautiful school. God works in strange ways, and he does answer prayers. You know, it's interesting. Everybody has their particular talent. And it's fascinating, the beauty and the wonder when you look at a group of people. I once had an audience with Pope John the 23rd, and he mentioned, you know, there's not a soul in this world you can't learn something from. And I said, oh, gosh, that's interesting. Not anybody. Everybody out there has their gifts, their talents. And the wonderful thing is to see that all occur. You know, when Jesus sent the apostles out, he let them just go. They were just being formed, and they were out evangelizing, doing things right away. They sent the 72 out, and off they go, and they proclaim the kingdom. And that's what we can do today. We can go out and proclaim the kingdom. We might not have all the expertise. You know, we had folks here at St. Michael's that figured out we needed to help with a thrift store, and maybe we could do that. And this dear couple, and they went with Father Mulholland and met the Lutheran minister and decided to form a thrift shop in this area. Well, that's the huge, huge operation today, which is known as the Dorcas shop. And they have just a marvelous facility down the way, and they help provide, with the money that they have from all of those goods that are sold in their thrift shop, they support families, they help people with need, they help people with electric bills, all of these different things that are being done in the name of Cary, in the name of the Dorcas shop, which is known in this area. All started because a couple in the parish said to Father Mulholland, we ought to work on this. And he in turn got together with a Lutheran minister to do that. There's things like that that are still going on today. People have an idea and they bring them forth and then they get excited about it. And that was the way the Honduras mission began. People just thinking maybe we should do something overseas and help some poor parish. It's people get an idea, they think about it, they bring it to the board of the church or other members of the church, and it's talked about, and the pastor gives approval for it, and off it goes, and create these wonderful ministries that we have here. And you may think that they're not important at that time. It's maybe very insignificant. Maybe it's just a bereavement. People are needing help with their getting through a death situation or something like that. Maybe it's really big, like figuring out how to get more books back to Honduras for little children to read, and English and all of that. But these things, once they're surfaced and brought together and thought about and prayed about, it becomes God's work right before our very eyes.